Hello.
Hey.
Well, hi everyone. This is my third attempt to do something different than music during this very special time of the, well, it's not every day we have a pandemic all over the world. I think I can. Hi everyone. Fuck. Sorry. I think I have a problem. No, it's okay. Sorry. So I'm glad to invite this time to my friend from the United States. Uh, he's, he's an author, he's an activist, he's many things. He's a geek like me, too. His name is Brent Lengo.
Yeah, Brenton Lengel, and yeah, you said that right.
Okay. And no, for me, it's great to talk with you, especially during these days. And no, I'm really happy you accept my invitation. For me, it will be great if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, totally.
To
Sorry, I was sharing this as a watch party, and I was hearing what you were saying like 5 seconds behind.
Yeah,
So I had to
it
close
happened the
it
same
out.
to me. I was like, what the fuck?
What's happening here? Yeah, so my name's Brenton Lengel. I am a playwright, Appalachian Trail 2,000 miler. For the non-Americans out there, the Appalachian Trail is a
Can I stop
unbroken.
you right there?
Yeah.
What it means?
Yeah, so the Appalachian Trail is an unbroken wilderness footpath. It runs from Georgia, like northern Georgia, to Maine, so across 14 states, pretty much the entire United States seaboard. And I have walked it in its entirety. And then I wrote a play about it, the first play ever about the Appalachian Trail. So it's a really cool thing, and it ties into my anarchist ideas, so I always make sure to mention that. I'm also a black belt in Kyokushin karate. Yeah, say what?
You can continue.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
sorry for the. I
No,
didn't
no,
know
no
right
biggie.
away.
Yeah, and I do a lot of writing. So, author of North to Maine. I'm also author of Snow White Zombie Apocalypse, which is a series put out by Scout Comics, and also a series of plays that I wrote. There's a lot of politics in it, though it's not like dry political diatribes. And I'm working with the Crew Shadows, which is a dark wave goth band, and they actually beat out Madonna and Beyonce for the #1 dance hit in the world in 2005. And me and the lead singer are collaborating on a fantasy novel. Did a lot with Occupy Wall Street. Was one of the first people in there. I joined it like 2 weeks into the movement, covered it on my radio show, Insurrection with Brenton Lengel, and that sort of, all of that sort of coalesced into where I am now, where, you know, I do my art and I also talk politics on YouTube and in various anarchist political groups. Had a radio show for a year, but got to be too much to keep up, so I got rid of it. Now I'm just doing YouTube. So yeah, I mean, that's me. That's kind of what I do. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, there's, but I don't know where to start. so many stuff. No, for me it's funny because Crook Shadows. I know Crook Shadows because before I was really involved in the industrial goth scene.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I play many times in I don't know, in a festival called Wake Got Treffen in Germany. I don't know if like Gustock for industrial goth in.
That's cool. I'm sure. I don't know if I don't remember Rogue mentioning that festival in particular. I know he plays Mara Luna every year.
Yeah, Mara Luna. Mara Luna is, I think, is one day, or maybe two. We go to like 4 days and
4 days.
like 17 events at the same time. It's really like Gustav. But yeah, and well, Croc Shadow is not especially my kind of music, but I know they are very well known in the scene. So I was surprised that.
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
word.
Well, it's funny. It's a small world, you know. I think the
Yeah.
arts is a very small scene, and like, even though I don't do music, like
Mm.
it was kind of inevitable that I'd run into you with the
Yeah.
music and the politics and the art. So,
Yeah.
yeah, happy
And,
to have this
and for
wonderful
me, I
human
was always
minds.
surprised that because in this kind of style, it's always, I don't know, mixed with guitars and electronics or just electronic. And this is one of the first group that I saw that they include a violin.
Not just one violin, two violins.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
was like,
That's Johanna and Dave. They're two violinists.
yeah. Also, it's cool. And I don't know. I'm curious to ask you, how was your experience during Occupy Wall Street?
Oh.
Because that was huge.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it was ginormous, like with Occupy, and I'm glad I get to talk about it because with the economy melting down around us, this is a lot like Occupy, except everybody has to stay away from everyone else.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, Occupy. I was living in New York City at the time. I was sort of coming up as an up and coming artist in the New York underground open mic scene, and I'd had a few plays produced. And I went to this one underground open mic called Penny's Open Mic in the East Village, and a number of my friends, including BZ Douglas, who is a phenomenal folk musician, and he's currently active in like the Progressive Party. Probably am butchering that, in Ohio. He and a number of my other friends, I started seeing them at Occupy Wall Street because, you know, there'd be protests in New York fairly frequently. You know, so you're like, oh, here's another protest. Oh, it's another socialist protest. They're not mad enough yet. That was what I was thinking at first. And then I started to see pictures of my friends at Occupy, and I was like, oh, well, maybe I should pay more attention to this. And then I started to see pictures of my friends getting arrested. And I was like, oh, man, I got to get down there.
This is
So,
becoming real.
yeah, it was right after the NYPD purposefully led an Occupy Wall Street march onto the Brooklyn Bridge so that they could then arrest them. And that was sort of the event that told me, like, okay, this is really serious. I should check this out. So I got a big black and red sign because I'd been reading a lot about anarcho-communism and the Spanish anarcho-syndicalists. I actually wrote a film, which will hopefully either be a film or maybe will be a comic book about Buenaventura Durruti. It's kind of like the anarchist Che Guevara. So I had really been reading like all about anarchists and fascists and all this stuff. That was where my head was at. And I headed down to Occupy. I had this big black and red sign, and I wrote on it, "Class warfare, bring it." Which got featured on CNN, by the way. And on the back, back in these days, I was still like really being very careful about what I said. I didn't want anything to be too bumper stickery. So instead of writing property is theft, I wrote private ownership of vital industry is theft. This is like,
that's very specific.
Yeah, very specific. So, I hung out at the park, which was great while the park was in. It was really like, a lot of people said, like, oh, it was dirty. It was not. It was clean. They actually had a maintenance crew running things.
I remember exactly those days, and there was a lot of propaganda against Occupy Wall Street. It's like they are dirty. They are just a bunch of hippies.
Yeah. And there was that element, but what were you asking there?
Of course, you can select people. No, you're not allowed to protest here. No, it's you will find everything. But for me, it was kind of huge because every time people were talking about socialism or this kind of ideas, everyone freaked out. And this was the first time that was quote accepted, or I don't know, people were talking about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got to think, like, the people in charge right now are still the baby boomers, and the baby boomers were raised on like Red Scare propaganda.
Yeah,
and they had this whole like, oh, total government control like the USSR, that's socialism, and that's you don't want that, and just free enterprise and good old American, that's capitalism.
Liberty.
Liberty. It's bullshit. It is such bullshit. So like, I find that people, one of the reasons I actually got interested in anarchism and started really looking into it seriously and into socialism seriously was, I started out pretty conservative when I was younger. I was a libertarian, like a right libertarian in college, because I kind of had more conservative economic views. I was very rah-rah USA, and I didn't hate gay people. So I was like, well, I can't be a Republican because I'm not liking the way they're treating gay people. So maybe I'll be this libertarian. And I did that until I got a job. The second I got out of college and got a job, and like I was working for this theater run by this guy who worked us like 60, 80 hours a week without overtime, and like would it was a very abusive environment where a lot of things that like our desire to work as professional artists was exploited by somebody to make ridiculous amounts of money, probably illegally. And I was just like doing all this stuff and seeing how that workplace went. And then I went from that to another abusive workplace and another abusive workplace. And I was just like, you know what? I started to question it. I hiked the Appalachian Trail, Maine to Georgia. And when you're on the Appalachian Trail, like you run on random acts of kindness from strangers. And 20 miles out in the woods, there's no police. Everybody still depends on each other. In fact, the most dangerous place is when you get back closer to civilization, because other people who go out and work and live as thru hikers, they're good people. They'll help you if you get injured or hurt. And by the end of the Appalachian Trail, I had my faith in humanity completely restored, and I had sort of begun to question all of this like capitalist propaganda. And I did the worst thing in the world for someone who is starting to question capitalism. I moved to New York City. And I'm surrounded by all this wealth and all these finances. And as an artist, I'm rubbing shoulders with like some of the wealthiest people in the city, because you've got to attract them to continue to do your art. And I'm just like, oh my God, these people are ridiculous. And so like, it finally just kind of coalesced. And in like 2010, right before Occupy Wall Street, I saw this graph, and it was like the distribution of wealth. And it's like where Americans think it is, where Americans want it to be, and what it actually is. And it was so disparate that like the 1% controlled so much of the wealth in the country. I kind of just threw my hands up in the air and said like, screw it. Property is theft. And so I took the time to learn about socialism and communism and anarchism and fascism, which is relevant now, unfortunately. And because I learned about this stuff, I was kind of able to have conversations that other people can't. I mean, like even like people with huge like media cred, like Ben Shapiro and Chris, whatever his name was, the guy that thought Bernie Sanders was going to start executing people in Central Park.
Of course.
Yeah, these people are politically illiterate. And like, I really think it is a function of that culture that has them steeped in all of this anti-Soviet propaganda that just doesn't apply anymore.
Yeah. For me, it's kind of almost like a religion, because you don't need proof. You need people that talk about it, and then the image is in your head, and all the socialists are evil, and I don't know.
No, I know just what you mean, and it's really weird, just kind of how that whole thing functions. Like, when you guys had the what was it, the yellow vest movement? Yeah, like so I wasn't in there, so I didn't see the yellow vest movement, but there was a bunch of propaganda I was seeing coming out of it on both sides of the equation. What was your experience like with the yellow vests? Like, what was it like being? Because you're French, right?
Yeah, but I'm not French. Actually, I'm from Chile.
Oh, you're from Chile?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Why did I think you were French?
Because I live in France.
Oh, well. All right. Were you in France?
But I can explain to you about it, because it was really interesting. The thing is that our current president, Macron, he wanted to increase the price of fuel, of gasoline. And people here, I don't know, poor people, poor middle class people live in little villages next to, I don't know, industries, or so they depend on their car to go to work, and they actually win just the minimum wage. So when this increase was just a little bit, it was like, no.
Yeah.
Because our current president, when he's kind of young for a president, he created a party from nothing, En Marche. And he has, I have a lot of energy and new ideas, and we will gonna move this country forward. But he was like, I don't know, he was like centrist, right?
Yeah, well, like all centrists.
Yeah, so all people was like, yeah, I like this guy. Why you like it? I don't know, he's young and active, but you hear the policy? No. So he get elected, and he said that he will not gonna touch all our, social security and everything that exists in France, that is kind of unique in the world. And then he start to try to change it,
Yeah, because he's a neoliberal, and that's what neoliberals
yeah.
do.
So he tried to change it, but you have to be careful, because here in France you can fuck up with that.
Well, I mean, this is the French. You had a little thing called the guillotine.
Yeah. No, and here for me it's amazing. Is the people here so organized. It's like, yeah, we're gonna go to strike that day. Everyone strike, and what you're gonna do? Is a more effective, one of the more effective ways. So when he tried to increase the price of fuel, well, that was the little drop.
Yeah, that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, so it's symbolic, the yellow vest, because that is what you wear here when you don't have any more fuel to.
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, it's symbolic. It's like, when you don't have any more fuel, you have to go to the side, or when you car breaks.
Yeah, you put on the yellow vest so people can see you and somebody can come.
Yeah, so I start with like protest. Yeah, we don't want it. And then I start to increase, and especially in Paris, with like very violent, like cars on fire, and they were asking that Macron get out of the presidency. No, was
resign would be the thing. They were
telling
to resign.
That resign the president, but well, nothing actually happened. But the gasoline, it didn't increase.
Yeah. Well, direct action is incredibly powerful, and all of the social. So it's like Noam Chomsky talks about it, where he says that the liberal.
But you need a critical mass. It can be just a little group of people.
Yeah, because they just ignore you if you're a little group of people.
Yeah.
I mean, this was something a lot of people don't know about Occupy Wall Street, because I'm even hearing this from leftists. I've heard that people were like, oh, they just went into the street and then they went home when it got cold. That's what some people said. And the thing was that Occupy Wall Street was dismantled, violently dismantled by mayors working in conjunction all across the country, using the police. They usually would use the park needs to be cleaned as a that was their reason for doing it. And they're like, yeah, get out of the park and we'll clean it and you can get back in. But everybody knew if they left, that was it. They'd never let them back in. So Michael Bloomberg, and this is documented. I saw this on video. Michael Bloomberg called the head of the New York Times. And he actually, at the time, he said, will you take my side in this? And the head of the New York Times said, yes, Mr. Mayor, I will take your side. And Bloomberg, in the middle of the night, released the NYPD, which he referred to as his personal army, and he said it's like the 8th largest army in the world or something. They deployed police helicopters from the air to prevent coverage from the air, and they kept journalists away from the park. And just pulled people out of their beds. Some folks had chained themselves to the kitchen. They cut through the chains. Eventually, a video of this was released, but nobody was paying attention at that point, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I remember. I think I saw that video when they raid the park, and all the people were like, no! And it was awful.
It was terrible, and I wasn't living in the park because I had my apartment. I was in Manhattan, and so like I was.
It was too cold.
Say what?
It was too cold.
It wasn't quite too cold, but yeah, it was getting there. I had actually been at a meeting to raise money for the park maintenance, and that had been that was done at the Yippee Museum, which was a kind of a radical hotbed that I ran an open mic with at. But anyway, so I heard about it. And I remembered at the time, because I'd been down a few times, I'd been like, oh, it was fun. I met some people. This is pretty interesting. And there'd been a major victory just a few days before, because the police tried to raid it once, but 4,000 activists came, packed in, and won. And the police had to back down, which is why they did it in the middle of the night. So as I woke up to it, my wife was like, Brent, you're going to hate this. Like, Occupy Wall Street got raided. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And like 2 days after that was November 17th. And there was a massive protest of about 50,000 people. Like, it started out as about 1,000 in the morning when I got there, and blew up into this ginormous protest. The media was everywhere, the police was everywhere, and eventually, like, the N17 protest went down, and there was a small concert, and then we went from the area where the concert, where there were some speakers, and I think there was a musical act, and up, and we actually crossed the Brooklyn Bridge that time. And that was like the biggest Occupy march that I was ever in. And I remember getting it there and seeing like the 50,000 people and being like, oh my God, this is going to look so incredible in the papers tomorrow. Like, this is the new 60s. This is really a thing. And then every single news source in the city, the papers, the TV, all of them were lying. And they were lying like big. Like they would say like, oh, it wasn't, it wasn't 50,000 people. It was 5,000 people. It was 1,000 protesters and 4,000 union members, and they didn't really do anything. You should just all go home and don't pay any attention.
Yeah, don't pay attention. Don't see that.
Yeah. So, that was where I kind of really realized something shady was going on. And I started to look more into it and to do more political organizing. I worked with George Martinez, who was the Occupy candidate for state Senate in New York. I also marched at the head of the yearly marijuana march with him. There's a cool picture of that where I look like Lieutenant Dan out of Forrest Gump. And, I continued to be politically active through that. And then gradually, as I've seen the movement kind of break up because of various things, it's also been very interesting to see which activists stayed committed, which activists, remained true to their ideals, and which activists either sold out or, in the case of one, became fascists. So, I think there's a lot that can be learned from Occupy Wall Street for movements going forward. But like the most important thing, I think, is to really look into it and not accept the pop culture narrative about it at face value, because it is just not true.
Yeah, of course. And I remember there was something, I don't know if you remember, but Peter Schiff? Peter
Schiff? Yeah, I'm familiar.
He's a kind of a millionaire, and he's kind of a anarcho-capitalist.
Wait. Is he one of the PayPal guys? Was that his thing?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just talk about all the time about buying gold and silver, but he went to Occupy Wall Street to say, yeah, no, me too. I'm against the government, but this is not the way. you need to you need to wake up. Capitalism is the solution.
Oh, I sort of remember this.
You can find it on YouTube. It was
Yeah.
so surreal, and people will listen to it. Like, what the fuck?
What are you talking about?
And
Well, it
then
was
I,
with
I
him.
guess
Adam Kokesh went to the park and stuff, and yeah, there was an element of the ANCAPs being there. So I'm sorry, continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, was just that, because I think it was so unique, that phenomenon in that time in America, that really yeah, bring a lot of different people, cool people, crazy people, but was I think for me has a real impact all over the world, because for me United States is like the symbol of capitalism. It's like I don't know, and I know it very well because I live in Chile,
Yeah,
and it's thanks to, I don't know if you know,
I'm
Milton
familiar with
Friedman.
what happened to Chile.
Milton Friedman.
Yeah, and like Operation Condor. The It's interesting too, because that ties into my experience as an activist, because like growing up, like my family, I found out recently, like I came from a line that like my on my mother's side, like my family was like from the peasants from the Carpathian Mountains, in an area that changed hands between Poland and Russia a bunch of times and stuff. And my father's side came from um, Hungary. So
Okay.
I'm like Hungarian. I'm like, yeah, I'm a Dracula basically. And one of the things growing up that we learned about a lot of the time, was slavery, and also the genocide of the Native Americans. Like they kind of cleaned it up in our public schools, but I had slightly better public schools because I went to public school in Northern Virginia, just outside of DC, and so we had better history programs than others, because I went to the same schools that like a lot of the politicians' kids went to. So
Mm.
better public schools than normal. But learning about all that stuff, I had always kind of comforted myself in being like, okay, these horrible things happened in the past, but I don't have anything to do with that. And my family had nothing to do with it. We didn't emigrate until much later. America's kind of original sins are not my sins.
Of course.
And then I was watching The Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein. And I found out what happened with Allende and Pinochet. And I actually remember watching that and weeping into my sink in my New York apartment at like 2 a.m. Just, because this was done when like Nixon was in power. This was ostensibly done. Yeah. So they did horrible things to your country, not really for me because they don't care about me, but ostensibly on the part of me, the American.
Just any idea of a country become socialist in America, your north or south, was like, no, we were not gonna allow that.
Yeah, and so you got this freaking fascist monster, Augusto Pinochet, torturing and disappearing people, and it's
not all people, just evil communists.
Yeah, evil communists.
Yeah.
Evil communists who want to give everyone health care and make sure everyone's fed and clothed and housed. We can't have that.
But it was crazy because really he was saying like, we are at war. We are at war with communism and all that Marxist ideas. We will not gonna let that infect our country. Like talking about like it was a disease. Was like was really surreal. And yeah, he did horrible things. Yeah. But he also that was just one part of the story. The other part of the story is the economic part, like with Milton Friedman and the Chicago Boys.
Basically ANCAPs. They say,
guys, we need to do this. We can make this. We can do anything we want. We can free the market. So they did it. They privatized everything. They privatized water, electricity. Everything is private. Well, not everything, but most of
Yeah.
basic things are private in Chile. And it's crazy because in the theory is like, yeah, you have more freedom, liberty, and the country will grow, will flourish because the state is the enemy and blah blah blah. No, no. What? Yeah, Chile became one of the more developed countries in the region, but the gap between rich and poor is huge.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's kind of the thing, like just with development in general. If everybody doesn't benefit from the development, I don't think it's
Of course,
necessarily a good idea. Like,
I argue a lot with guys there because they say, yeah, but we grow 3% last year. Yeah, but you're still fucking poor.
can you eat that 3%? It's the same thing like with Americans who don't own stocks that are like, oh, our country's doing so well. The economy is amazing because the stock market is doing well. Do you own stocks? Well, no, but did your paycheck go up? No, but
yeah, it's crazy. It's like, that is what I was talking, that it's kind of like a religion, because you don't need proof. You don't need to touch it. It's just the idea that you are on the winning team.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also like freedom in general, I've always found that this is something that like right libertarians and capitalist apologists don't understand about freedom. So there's two types of freedom. There is positive freedom and negative freedom. Positive freedom is the ability to actually do things, and negative freedom is freedom from direct oppression. So a good example of why negative freedom on its own is not it's not real freedom is that it's like saying to a homeless man under the bridge, you, sir, you are free. You are free to donate as much money as you want to the political candidate of your choice, and you have that same freedom, same as Peter Schiff. Peter Schiff can also donate. Isn't that great that you and Peter Schiff are both free?
Yeah, you're both equal.
Yeah. If you can't actually do what you want, you're not free.
No, it's that thing is amazed me of anarcho-capitalism or libertarians. It's like every example is like in a vacuum. It's like there's no context.
Yeah,
it's like okay, you're free, but if you don't have money, if you don't have a place to, I don't know, it's crazy. They just select to do example.
They're funded by, so there's a great article that I recommend everybody go check out. It's on Exiled Online, and it's called something like Fools, Finks, and FBI Stooges, or something like that. Radicals, Imbeciles, and FBI Stooges. And it is a guy who traces the origins, like with the receipts, with like the literal paper of the right libertarian movement in the United States, both from the fact that like it gets funded by Charles Koch, and giving this guy named Richard Fink a bunch of money to run it, and also like this weird intersection with the FBI, because and if you're in New York, like I'm like literally one of the last yippies. Like if you go back to the Youth International Party, I was voted in along with John Murdoch and at the Yippie Museum because we were doing work there. Yippies was a radical party from the 60s, founded by Abbie Hoffman and Jerry Rubin. Abbie Hoffman, he wrote Steal This Book, which is a fun book. If you get it, steal it if you can. And Jerry Rubin, they went separate ways. Abbie Hoffman kind of really stayed true to his politics, but he also got very depressed and eventually killed himself. And then you have Jerry Rubin, who was like very much like the do-it guy who went out and made a bunch of money, kind of had a career as a minor celebrity, and his sort of like kind of free love, do whatever you want 60s thing without the radical element, where he embraced capitalism, that sort of got grabbed by Richard Fink and Charles Koch and expanded. And what's really weird, they have it in the article, is there was a flyer put out supposedly by the Hunter College Libertarians, Hunter College being a college in New York, that suggested, in the flyer, it literally suggested shooting Richard Nixon. And the FBI at the time was super paranoid, and they were looking into every organization. And this flyer was sent to the FBI, and in documents that were later released, the FBI was like, oh, we don't care about that. We're not looking into anything with the Hunter College.
What the fuck?
Yeah, because it was probably the FBI putting that out there in order to take this revolutionary energy and, reabsorb it into the country. Because that's the only thing I can understand of why an organization could put out something that suggests killing the president, and the FBI is just like, yeah, we don't care.
Yeah. No, but the media is so, well, the media is a big word, but some medias, all the media is always used as a tool, you know, what you want to accomplish something. For example, in Chile, when Allende was president, after Nixon, I don't know, you know the story, but actually was like, well, United States that paid some syndicates in Chile to stop working. Especially truck drivers, syndicates of truck drivers. So everything was still, and that created a lot of instability in the country. Like the food didn't arrive on time. There was scarcity, and all the journals that were controlled from the right, they were saying it's Allende's fault. It's Allende's fault.
Yeah.
And people start to take that, and
they hear it enough.
Yeah, then the military arrive like this kind of superheroes and kill everyone, and problem solved. Yeah. So it was like a very, it really like take it from a comic book. You know, it's such an evil plan. You know, like I don't know, was crazy, but was really effective, and but it's the same. For example, what you were saying with Occupy Wall Street, when there was a huge march with many people, and then the media say no,
it wasn't that many people. You know, I remember when I was one of the first political things I remember when I was a little kid was when we had the first Iraq War. And one of the things that I heard from my parents, which was they'd probably heard through the news, was how Saddam Hussein lied to his people and would lie about like military victories that Iraq was having, how they shot down 7 American planes in one day, and this was ridiculous. And I kind of thought about that, and I was like, okay, so that's what like an evil dictator does, is they lie to their populace to keep the populace doing what they want. And going to Occupy Wall Street and seeing the media lie, it was just it's like, there's no difference suddenly.
No.
Particularly not now that we have like an evil dictator in the United States, essentially, with Donald Trump. The only saving grace with Donald Trump is, well, there's two saving graces with Donald Trump. 3. I'll give you 3. Okay. The first is that he's really stupid. Like intensely stupid and cowardly and craven. And because of this, he's not very effective at being a strongman. He knows how to like ape like he's a big, buff, smart guy, but he can't keep anybody employed. He can't actually enact his will most of the time. And he's horribly corrupt. And the second the power dynamic shifts against him, he's probably going to wind up in jail. So that's one saving grace. Second saving grace about Donald Trump is that Donald Trump wants to be liked. He really does. He's doing it for like fame and accolade, and he wants everybody to like him. And because of that, he signed stuff like the coronavirus bill, where most recently, like the stimulus, where because he realizes people are going to hate him if he doesn't.
Do you think he's insecure?
Oh,
like
intense.
psychological
Yeah.
insecure.
If you look into that man's history, his father treated him so terribly, and like he has been insecure his entire life. And he's always been this kind of weirdo rich boy that didn't fit. He didn't fit into upper crust New York society. The only place he actually ever really flourished, if I recall, was when his dad sent him to military school. He apparently did very well there, which is horrifying.
I can imagine.
Yeah. But he didn't go into the military. He lied about having bone spurs. You know, the abuse that his father must have heaped on him, because his father was arrested marching with the KKK, with the Ku Klux Klan in New York. Oh yeah. You can look this up. This is true. And they'll say, well, he wasn't with the KKK. He was just arrested at the same time, and he wasn't charged. Now, here's the thing. As somebody who has been arrested by the police in New York as part of a political march and failure to disperse, sometimes the police will grab random people. That's true. It can happen. It can happen. It's rare, but it can happen. If you get arrested with activists, it is almost always that you were with those activists, that you were marching with them. Don't have to be a card-carrying member. And two, they're like, well, he was released when he wasn't charged. Yeah, because he's a rich guy. Like, as soon as the cops realized they'd arrested a millionaire, they're just like, oh, go shit, get him out of here before he causes trouble for us. Like, so that means nothing. And the fact that he was out in the street, like, with these people, it's failure.
Wait. So there's people that saying it's not true?
They say it's misleading.
Okay.
They just say that because they want to protect Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is obviously
crazy. There are so many people that are fans.
Yeah.
Like, why? No, you just want to attack the president and
weak-minded sheep. It's one way.
It's like and everyone that I don't know. You say something against Donald Trump, you say, yeah, but Obama.
You know, it's funny too, because like I had so many issues with Obama. I was critical of Obama.
He was not
the entire time he was president. Yeah. And I mean, Obama, I didn't like his immigration policy. I did not like his foreign policy. I did not like the fact that he was a fake progressive and was pretty much just a Republican, like a 90s era Republican in a blue suit. But
George Strait.
Yeah. Say what?
The strikes with the drone strike.
Oh, the drone strike. Yeah. Right. The drone strikes horrified me. You know, but like, yeah. So, but at the same time, like, so I'm sitting here being critical of Obama for years. And then and then I'm continuing on being critical of Trump. And they're like, oh, well, you just want Obama. I'm like, I'm an anarchist. Where would you get that I want Obama from? I will say this much about Obama. He was cool. I will give him that. He was a cool president that made the country look good. He did, and you know, he didn't end the wars. He didn't do anything that the progressives wanted him to do. He gave us kind of this bullshit he gave us this bullshit Obamacare that it did expand.
Kind of pretend put your name on it. No.
Yeah. He didn't put. To be fair, he didn't put his name on it. That was the Republicans saying that. Yeah, it was the Affordable Care Act, and the Republicans wanted to associate it with him. But it was a conservative, like, Heritage Foundation thing, because Democrats don't know how to negotiate. They'll like come to the table and they'll go to the Republicans and they'll be like, because they're like, okay, I want universal health care. Well, maybe the Republicans won't like that. No, let's do this and do this. And you know what? This is just Mitt Romney's plan. I'm going to take Mitt Romney's health care plan, put a couple of other things on it. And here, Republicans, would you please sign this bill? Would you please, would you? Because it's your plan. Wouldn't you like it? And the Republicans are just going to go and knock it out of your damn hands because you're you're a freaking pussy.
Yeah. No, but I think it's really, really hard. I don't know. I'm not Obama. I'm not a friend of Obama, but I think even if you have great ideas, like, let's do this, let's do that.
Yeah.
Finally, you have to. People are so scared of socialism in the United States. So it's kind of. I don't know how can I propose this, but at the same time don't scare people.
Yeah. You know, I've said for a long time that what Americans
Except
need to
Bernie
do.
Sanders.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders don't give a fuck.
Bernie Sanders is amazing.
Yeah, but this is
Like,
the first time he tell it like it is. It's like, no, we need to do this because that. But
I feel
every
like
other candidate is like, maybe if we have the chance, it would be good that we do this.
I kind of feel like what Americans need, because Americans have a very high opinion of ourselves, and I feel like what we need to do, and socialism sounds foreign, what we need to do is we need to like just do socialism in America, but call it something else and pretend like we invented it. And then people will be fine with it. Because I mean, like, you know, a lot of things that people said were
Or
so.
maybe rebrand it. You just need to rebrand it, like, I don't know,
Yeah, fine.
a new name.
I've always
that
said,
people feel safe. I don't know.
yeah, FDR suggested this. I would like to see something like an economic bill of rights, and just establish
Voila.
what rights all Americans have by virtue of being Americans. And
Yeah.
I'd like to see something in there like UBI. You know, I'd like to see mandatory profit sharing. You know, it's just stuff like that, so we don't have to actually have a revolution and people start killing each other in the streets.
Yeah.
Because you know, oftentimes
Because most of the people completely agree. They all agree to have a free healthcare, and a lot of politics is just when they mention the word socialism, it would everyone freak out. Like, no, it can happen. But I think that especially during these times of coronavirus, COVID-19, people start to think about their priorities. You know, it's like when you can see, for example, the different measures here in France or in European countries, when people is first more than the economy.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's important to have this kind of conversation. You know.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, in a sane world, COVID-19 would be nothing, especially in America. Like we have,
you have all the technology, all the best doctors, but no, you need to pay for it.
Yeah, because there's a bunch of, you know, there's a bunch of assholes at the top that benefit. Like, and everything about American society is kind of structured to try to push you in that direction. It's like, you ever play like an RPG where it's like, oh, it's like a sandbox game where you can do whatever you want, and they have like dialogue trees and stuff, and like, but if you pick the wrong dialogue tree that the game doesn't want you to pick, it still forces you to go the way it wants you to go.
There's no really freedom.
Yeah, there's no actual freedom. There is the illusion of freedom.
Yeah.
And so, like, I mean, a good example is this. I have a friend, and he he was set to inherit a house. Okay. And he told me about this. I got like hopping mad about it. I made a post about it and everything. Here's what happened. This house was built by his grandfather, literally with his own hands. Bank never had a piece of it. Put up by the grandfather and the grandfather's church like 25 years ago. Grandfather passes away. Grandmother owns the house. Grandmother is on her way out, wants him to have the home. He's happy because he's a millennial, and this is probably the best chance he's going to have at getting a home. So what he does is, you know, he moves into the house, takes it over. It's the family home, and is getting everything taken care of when, boom, grandmother takes a fall. And as a result, she has to be put into a nursing home. And as it turns out, she's not going to be able to come out. She needs 24-hour care. There's no way for the family to provide that. So nursing home. Well, here's the deal. The only way to get her care for that in America is if she is super poor for Medicaid, because they got all this means testing bullshit on it to make sure that like you have to be poor to get it. And one of the things is that she must sell all assets at fair market value, which includes the house. So now my friend is stuck there trying to buy a house from himself, essentially. because
Of
the
course.
grandmother wants to give it to him but can't because they'll kick him out. It's ridiculous. And then
Yeah.
on top of that, he was talking to me the other night, and we were going back and forth on this. I'm like, dude, this is fucked up. And he's like, it's not even the worst thing, because he's self-employed and he's making all the money he needs self-employed, but can't get a home loan without having a regular employer. So even then, even when you have the money and you have the property, you must go and get a job working for some asshole capitalist for less sometimes than what you were making otherwise, or the capitalist financial structure will not think you're a worthy investment. And the whole reason you even have to have the investment is so you can buy your house from yourself. And like, it's like this across the board. Like, I really believe that the reason they will not give Americans universal health care, and nobody on the right or the left talks about this, but I remembered when I was I had to move a little while ago, and when I was moving, I had to be like, I have to be very careful with my job, because my wife has a chronic illness, and if we lose our health insurance, she could die. Like, I can't be without it for even a week. So I'm like, okay, so I have to work for a company that can provide health care, because the Obama marketplace thing is, nobody can afford that. They really can't. So if you work and if you don't get like Medicaid, you have to work for a company that is big enough to pay those benefits, or you risk dying, or you risk the health of your and well-being of your family. And the only companies that can afford to really do that tend to be the really big companies. So right there, you have a bunch of skilled workers who are required in all but name to work for big business, and usually for less than they would otherwise be able to make or otherwise receive, because these benefits, these things that you need to live, are held over your head. One after another, everything in the society, whether they did it on purpose or it just worked out this way, is structured to funnel people towards the choice that the rich and powerful have already decided we should all make. It is monstrous and evil.
I don't know if you know the concept of structural violence.
Yes, yeah, I'm very familiar. Where if someone has basically, if society deprives you of something because of inability to pay or because they're discriminating against you, that is considered violence when preventable illness, disease, and stuff happen to you.
Yeah, it's like I'm hanging a bottle of water over your head, and you're thirsty, but you can grab it. You have to ask me to have it.
Yeah,
like it's. I don't know. For me, it's kind of a little analogy with what's happening here in France. Is really, I'm really happy to be here. I've lived here since 8 years now.
That's awesome.
And here is because the system in Chile is pretty much like in America.
It's probably
private. Yeah, it's kind of the same. You have, for example, when I was working there, I'm a graphic designer, so I was having a good life, but you have to have private insurance. You don't have a choice. If not, if you're in public, it's just it's awful. You will never gonna have the chance to go to a doctor. And here in France, it's completely different. It's like the history of France is very interesting. I think you know it a little about it, but they fought a lot to create a system that served the people, actually. And for me, with what is happening right now, is so huge, the contrast between countries. It's like huge.
I have a feeling it's going to be worse in America, to tell you the truth, than pretty much anywhere else, because like Italy had the second best rated hospital system, and like they actually did have more of a social safety net than America did.
Yeah, but the problem is that the disease spread so quickly that you have this amount of people sick, this hospital,
Yeah.
if you are in the right balance, it will work. But with Italy was too much,
Mm.
because well, I don't know, you have went to Italy, but it's
I was
more
actually
like
born in
Latin
Italy.
countries. They don't like to follow the rule that much, so they say no, you have to stay indoors. No, fuck
Mhm.
you.
That is very
So,
Italian. They are
so
Machiavellian.
until people start to die, they say okay, okay.
Yeah.
But for me, what's not the problem is not the yeah, they have a great health system like here in France. And here in France, they actually, at the beginning, the person say, yeah, we would like you stay at home, like the nice talk, please. And people, yeah, some people stay at home, but other people don't, because they are like Italians, like, no, I do what I want.
My freedoms.
Yeah,
Emphasis on dumb.
yeah. So they went to the bar. They went to the bar. So the person say, "Okay, no." So he passed a law, and now we are all in lockdown. Everyone, rich and poor, every. And if you want to get out, you need to fill a form that you
That's it.
print. Yeah, and you need to say, yeah, I would like. Oh, I will go to a supermarket.
You have to fill out a form to go to the supermarket.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy. It's like
Nuts.
1984. Yeah,
Well,
no, it's
and
kind of scary.
how long is that supposed to go on? I mean, I
We don't
definitely would
know.
not like to fill out a form to go to the supermarket. I don't like to fill out a form to do anything, but
No, me neither. For me, it was kind of weird. And but I don't know. I think for a couple of weeks it will be okay. But after that, I think it's gonna get weird.
yeah. Well, cabin fever will set in. I'm lucky.
because
Mhm.
because that's the thing with these kind of emergencies. I don't know, like, for example, if you saw history, every time there is a time of crisis, like, governments say, yeah, party, we're gonna pass all the laws that we want. So no, but here people in France is very aware of that, so
Yeah. Well, I think the
we
thing.
we all stay at home and fill the forms, and everything is good, but we are aware that it could be a kind of dangerous, give so much power to the government.
Yeah. Well, and to get onto things, because this is anarchism, comics, politics, and science fiction. It's been
Sorry,
very yeah.
to get
It's
it
been
all politics.
Yeah, we've been a lot, but it's very interesting. Like, because I'm writing the second issue of Snow White Zombie right now,
Oh, great.
and I'm literally like writing a story about a zombie apocalypse during a pandemic, and
No.
it is nuts just how much this stuff is like. I'm supposed to write a prequel, like 4 or 5 pages for people that gave to our Kickstarter.
How
Um,
you get that idea? Sorry
for
for interrupt you.
Oh yeah, no, I love telling this story. All right, so when I first moved to New York, I hadn't had any plays produced. I'd written one like full length and one short play, and I thought I was going to get into all these colleges and stuff, and get my MFA, and everyone rejected me across the board. And so I was sitting there, and somebody recommended this theater group called the New York Theater Experiment. And they had what was called a 24-hour play competition, where they gave you a prompt and some stuff that you had to use, like an apple you could pick from. And you were supposed to write, select, perform, rehearse, and perform a 10-minute play within 24 hours. So from the time they sent out the email, clock is ticking. So I got the email. I was ready to go, and the theme of it was like fairy tale smackdown, and they wanted to do like, I guess, kind of fun fractured fairy tales. And I had this idea that I had wanted to do a zombie play for a while. I'd actually thought I was going to do zombie Shakespeare, but then I was like, I can't write iambic pentameter. So what I did was I had the fairy tale idea, I had the zombie idea already back there, and I saw some of the stuff, and I was just like, oh, Snow White awakens to Prince Charming's kiss 28 days after the zombie apocalypse. And I started from that. The seven dwarves are dead. The prince is polyamorous. His paramour Rapunzel, she's like a badass zombie fighter. She's killed Captain Hook and taken his jacket, and she does karate, because I thought slow zombies would be boring on stage, so I had them doing like martial arts and shit. But I wrote that play, and I knew it was really good. Like lightning struck, and I was like, oh, this is really good. This is one of the best things I've written. So I sent it off, and they selected it. And I was so excited, because I remember I was so used to being rejected that, like, I got the email, and it's like, dear Brent, we are, and I'm like, fuck this. No, they said no again. They're idiots. They're all, wait, they said yes. And so they went, and the actors got the play, and they performed it, and they used like cardboard props and stuff. And I remember
a video of that.
I do have. There is a video actually of the full length. I'll tell you what. I'll send it to you, because there is a video of the full length production on Vimeo. Theater looks a little like shit on there, but I'll send it to you. Anyway, so I'm like, the actors, they came out and they said to me like, oh my God, this play is so good afterwards. Like, this reads like something someone who went to Yale wrote. And I was like, really? Well, maybe you should tell Yale about that, because they rejected me. So that play.
That's a weird compliment.
It is a weird compliment. Well, theater's hoity-toity academia a lot of the time. Okay. It's fine art. So that play then went on to be selected for the Estrogenius Festival, a celebration of female voices. And I guess they thought that what I had written really spoke to the female experience. So that play, that production of it, we did like a full production in there. And that like was the perfect production. The guy who played Prince Charming wound up being the guy who got me into the theater company that I'm still working with, State of Play. And we just had a blast doing it. The audience loved it. We won an award. We got an extended run. They brought it back 5 years later for like the Best of Estro 10-year anniversary, where it got nominated for an NYIT award. I did a longer version in the New York Fringe Festival in 2012. And then I wound up meeting my artist, Hyando Park. And I was like, this would make a pretty cool comic. So I had some help from some friends, and we wrote out the comic and got it. It came out this past October. Critics loved it. It's got the same kind of reaction that it got in the theater. And we just raised $10,000 on Kickstarter to do the second issue. That's impressive. Yeah, I was blown away. I was like, I'd never run anything, and the first time you run a Kickstarter is the hardest. So I'm used to like being basically begging people to come out to the theater. Like, come out and see this play. I swear to you, it's good. And I put that Kickstarter out there, and we were funded within like the first 48 hours.
People have to go out from their home.
Yeah.
They just need to push the button.
Well, yeah, and I'm wondering how this is going to affect Kickstarter in the comics industry, because Diamond, the major distributor of like all comics in the United States, is shut down. Yeah, I'm hoping. I'm cautiously hopeful that we'll get through this and things will. I don't think they'll ever go back to normal. I think this is proving the need for a welfare state and for universal health care in the United States, which I think is going to be, and perhaps UBI, universal basic income, which would be amazing.
The Republicans were talking about it.
Yeah. Well,
what the fuck?
People, they like to keep things where they are, but the fact is socialism makes sense. Like, I really don't think we are in a position as a society anymore to have this Protestant work ethic where everybody must work, everybody must contribute, everyone must belong. Because like
Yeah.
a society that does that, that says that everyone must work, everyone must fit in and contribute, like that's really an insane society that
Of
is
course.
unsure of itself.
I
Because
think in one
Mhm.
point, humanity actually, when were in another time, 100 years ago, you really have to work
Mm.
for a living. You really have to. But even then, there were trade and, well, whatever. But now, with the technology we have, when we throw away the half of the stuff we made,
Mhm.
it's like stupid.
Yeah,
It's
when
like
we have more
completely
yeah.
inefficient,
Mhm.
archaic, stupid system.
Yeah.
It's just,
Well,
and young people are starting to realize that. I think.
I think they really are. Well, here's the thing that a lot of people don't get is that money isn't real. It's not. Money is not wealth. It is a measure. It's a measuring tool of productive capacity. So, like people are like, oh, we can't build this house. We don't have enough money. Or where's the money going to come from for universal health care? The money never came from anywhere. It's all in everyone's head.
Yeah,
And so it's like kind of saying like,
it's like a religion. We
yeah.
It worked because all believe in it.
Well, what's that they say in the Bible? You cannot serve God and mammon. You cannot serve God and money because money itself is a religion because it's the symbolic store of value that only has value because everybody decides it has value. And so like, when they say like, oh, we can't do this, we don't have enough money, that's like going like, oh, we can't build this house, there aren't enough inches. Like,
Yeah,
so
of course.
I think as the productive capacity continues to increase, here's the big thing that's going to be: is the world of the future going to be a utopia or a dystopia? Putting aside climate change, and we can talk about climate change later because I think like the Green New Deal and socialism is the only thing that can really save us at this point. But just let's assume there was no climate change, everything goes on the way it is. With technology developing the way it is, eventually someone's going to invent replicators, like on Star Trek. We're working in that science fiction angle, where you
Yes,
can just make whatever you want.
like 3D printing
Yeah,
already.
exactly, like 3D printing. And the question then becomes, who owns the replicators and who owns what is made in the replicators?
Yes.
So if you have a giant replicator that can make replicators, and you can make robots to do everything for you, you can just the labor is no longer essential to
No.
the functioning of society. If everyone owns the replicators and all somebody has to do is just go next door and say, hey Ted, could you make me a replicator? Yeah, here you go, thank you Ted, and goes off and makes whatever they need, and the robots are taking care of everything. Well, that's a utopia.
Yeah.
But if a small class of capitalists own the replicators and have intellectual property over everything that's made in the replicator and set up things that prevent people from replicating things they don't want them to, and we own the robots and everybody else, guess what? You're shit out of luck. That's a
Yeah.
dystopia. And
Yes.
if we stay with capitalism, that is exactly where we're going.
Yes.
Assuming we survive global climate change, which we probably won't.
Yes. Yes, because that system is based on a scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
But we have more and more evidence that we can make more and more things more faster. Like, I don't know, Buckminster Fuller.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, he was a genius. He saw what was coming. Like, you remember the first computers is like, I don't know, was like the size of a room, and now we have it in our pockets.
Yeah.
So we have the ability. We have probably the capitalism would say, yeah, but it's just the incentive, the monetary incentive that.
Yeah. Funny how they're always like, oh yeah, we're definitely key. Yeah, you're key
Yeah.
because you set up the whole system around yourself. You're solving a problem you created. You know
Yeah,
what that's like?
but for example, for me, it's very simple. For example, now in internet, you can download all the movies,
Mhm.
all the music, all the software that you want, but you don't. You
Yeah.
just download what you need.
Yep.
and that is a system that is efficient, you know.
Absolutely. And it's a good
So
example of like common property.
yeah,
That, but I'm sorry,
because
continue.
because the problem is that um, capitalists are so scared that if they give away the stuff for free, everything will grab everything, you know, out
Mm-hmm.
of control. But no, we just take what we need,
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, there'll
basically.
probably be like a few people who are hoarders and just weird and do that, but
Yeah,
that's people with mental issues that we can deal
but
with.
but yeah, but for me, the first step is actually what is happening now. It's like people are realizing that this kind of idea of individualism
Mm-hmm.
doesn't exist. Because, for example, with COVID-19, the virus didn't doesn't care if you're black, white,
Rich, poor.
Chinese, rich, poor, and even if you have all the money, you need to interact with other people.
Yep.
So they have to be a common effort,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Well, you know,
a,
the thing
a
with
collective effort to try to decrease the people get sick. And for me, it's kind of break that kind of theory that they love the I know myself, individualism, and everything is it's just not you. Everything that you do affect other people,
yeah.
and with the this virus is more evident than ever.
I've always seen like individualism and collectivism as kind of a bullshit way to frame things because really
Yeah,
they're two sides of the same coin. Like humans really can't exist outside of society. You see what happens when we are actually made to be individuals. Like if you look at like people who are put into solitary confinement, they start
yeah,
hallucinating and die.
yes,
Like and similarly, like the whole idea of the individualism versus collectivism, where they're like there is no society, there's only individuals, and therefore the society needs to uphold the individual. In practice, that's not what happens.
no,
Because if you hold the individual over society, really what you're doing is you're saying, I want this specific individual held over the wishes of all these other individuals,
yeah,
which yeah, no, that's just hierarchy. That's just elitism. It's not individualism at all. Self, and this gets into my spirituality. I'm a Buddhist. And
mm,
a lot of the stuff, by the way, you should, anybody who's interested in some of the more spiritual stuff that I've been saying should look up Alan Watts. He's a phenomenal philosopher and does a good job of describing Buddhism in a way that Westerners can understand. So, like, he talks about how self implies other. Like, you can't, and I talk about this in one of my videos. If I didn't have this background, like if there was no background, not white, not black, just nothing, you wouldn't be able to see me because you wouldn't be able to see where I end and my environment begins. It's an impossible thing. Um, so again, I don't exist except in relation with the stuff that's not me. And it's the same thing as I don't exist except the individual does not exist except in relation to the greater society, and the greater society does not exist except in relation to the individual. Again, two sides of the same coin. So people say, well, what do you care about more? Do you care about society or the individual? The answer to this question is you have to care about them the same, the exact same. Because if you don't, like really it's like saying I want the coin to always end up heads up. It doesn't work. It's not philosophically grounded. Now, like if it comes to a choice between one person's will and 100 people's will, obviously you go with the 100 people because it's just more at that point and you can't not make a choice there. But at the same time, like I really think this is a false bill of goods that we have been sold between individualism and collectivism, and it's just used to scare you. Because
mm,
humans, we can only recognize some 150 or so individuals as people, and then everybody gets grouped into an abstract.
mm,
And like it's very easy to imagine that those people in that abstract aren't individuals. Like you even see like the far right wingers with their stupid ass NPC meme, like where they actually think that the herd, the group of people that they don't personally see as individuals, actually aren't, that they're just mindless animals. But it's just not the case. Every single person out there is just as much a person as you or me.
Yeah, of course. No, for me, it's it's kind of the scare to disappear, disappear in the mass.
Yeah, which I guess is kind of a fear of death, if you want to think about it.
Yeah, but maybe it's more like not to be relevant, because in our current society, you have to be the number one, the more successful. It's a very competitive society that we live in. So when you disappear in the mass, it's like, no, I want to be special. But I think it's all is just basically and scientifically is just an illusion. We are all connected. We like it or not. Everything we create is this contract, these imaginary boundaries. Now with the virus, doesn't care. It doesn't exist. You see it's completely ridiculous. Because every country is working in different. We decrease the virus like 10%, but what about the rest of the world?
Well,
you have to attack to confront this problem like globally. If not, it will not gonna be
well,
solved.
what was it the scientists have said? If you could wave a magic wand and force every person on Earth to just stay still for like 14 days and 6 feet apart from each other, virus would be gone in 14 days. We'd never see it again. So collective action is much more important now.
I would like to talk about. Well, we talk a lot about politics, but about science fiction, because I think really what is happening right now is like a science fiction movie. I don't know, like. But
curse
for me, what will we gonna what will gonna happen moving forward? Do you think actually what, like you were saying, we're gonna evolve? Continue evolving like in a society with money. We will gonna develop technology according to nature, and we're gonna reach the stars, or we're gonna
or
each other. And
I think humanity will probably survive this, to tell you the truth, and I think we will probably also survive the increasing temperature from global warming. What's really going to be important, though, is that we change the way that we're doing things.
For me, the way we more than the thing we're doing is the way we see things, or priorities, or values. I think that's a key to keep evolving, because if we stay in the same structure, it will never going to change.
Yeah, well, and I mean, as a Buddhist, like a lot of. So there's this thing in my Buddhist sect, which is Soka Gakkai, Nichiren Buddhism. We call this devilish functions. Other ways of understanding it is attachment, and attachment doesn't mean like wanting stuff. It means being unreasonably attached to the status quo, like to the things that you have. People don't like change, and we all have this psychological tendency to, even when we try to change ourselves or someone else tries to change us, there's this instinctive, it is a desire to hold on to things as they are. And the thing is that that's like the core cause of all of our suffering. And I think like you talk to like a freaking fascist or something, they're suffering from like an extreme version of that attachment, where they want this weirdo traditional society. Or you talk to a conservative, it's slightly less, but it's this desire to just stop everything from moving, Don't change countries. Don't breed with different races. Don't change the politics. Keep the hierarchy exactly where it is.
Conservative.
I can't deal with things if
Interesting.
they're constantly moving around and changing. That is so much folly, though, because like if there is one single law of the universe that is completely immutable, it's that everything changes. Change is an absolute constant. Everything dies, everything evolves, everything changes, and you can either find a way to, I guess, surf those waves of change, or you can be miserable. But it's not going to stop anything. This is not, if I go to like Norse mythology, you fight the battle against the frost giants and you lose. You always lose.
Yeah. For me, I love the quote from Buckminster Fuller. I just posted this: "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." And I think
really
that's what we need, like an alternative. If you propose to people, look, guys, this is the shit. We're gonna do this, and it will gonna be a transition period, but it will be better. More than say, I don't know, capitalism is bullshit, because it will you can keep doing that forever.
Yeah.
We actually need to propose new
ideas. Yeah. I think we need to get to a point to transcend capitalism where we make it obsolete. And it needs to be done both with technology and with socially. One of the things I was thinking, actually, I'm not a programmer, so I don't 100% understand this. But have you heard of swarm technology? Okay, so swarm technology, like a swarm of bees. These are systems in nature that function to where the whole, the collective, if you want to call it, is able to function in a way that it is smarter than the sum of its parts. So even though no individual bee can even begin to conceive the idea of where the best place to put a hive is, or even what their hive is, their swarm intelligence allows them to find the ideal placement for their hives. So humans, using computers, have adapted a form of this that is called swarm technology. And it takes individual human inputs. And what's really interesting about it is that it outperforms both markets and experts. So they used it, for instance, very famously a few years ago to predict the winner of the Kentucky Derby. So you've got the market that's choosing the winner by looking at the odds. What everyone's betting and putting their money on, that's the horse that they think is going to win. And so like the odds are at this. Now, as we know, markets often fail and the odds are not correct because, one, you can't know the future, and because, two, markets, unfortunately, are biased towards previous actors within that market. Monkey see, monkey do. You drop a bunch of money on this horse, the horse's odds shoot up, suddenly everybody goes, oh, that guy knows something I don't, and goes and throws money at that horse. Well, maybe that guy doesn't know something you don't. He just had a bunch of money to throw around.
That is like the stock market.
Yeah. And then you've got the experts. And if you talk to like the Marxists, they really want to run like central planning from expertise, and somebody who really knows about this kind of thing is going to be put in charge of this sector of the economy and this sector of the economy. And so the experts make their predictions on which horses they think will win. And the thing is that the experts are often wrong. Because, people were really, there's a little bit of variance in intelligence between us, but it's not huge, unbridgeable gulfs overall. So they were able to take this swarm technology and pass it out to a bunch of different people. And those people, by acting collectively through the program, were able to correctly identify the winner of the Kentucky Derby. And I think it wasn't just the winner. I think it was like the top 3 horses, and they got it exactly right. So what I would actually really like to see is a social system that uses that kind of technology to decide how many houses to build, where to build them, how many of this to produce, how many of that to produce. And if we can do it in such a way that we remove human egos from the thing, and we actually manage to cut back or eliminate corruption, again,
Yeah.
utopia.
For me, basically the answer is science, because this is a universal language. You can have an opinion about gravity.
It's funny though. I would say music is the universal language.
yeah, and for me, that's the moving forward. I think humanity we're gonna build our society based on that, because it's something that all can understand. And actually, if it were like that, I have this proposal. For example, we need to build 100 houses. You say, no, we need to build 110. Why? Evidence, hypothesis. Like, it's not like I have opinion. I have an opinion, and for me, that's kind of the future. Well, I'm a big fan of Star Trek, so I can be influenced by that. But
what's your favorite episode of Star Trek, by the way? Even if not your favorite, what's one that you really like, one that just stands out to you?
Actually, I saw one of your previous podcasts, and you mentioned the one with the people black and white, and I love that.
From the original.
So fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And especially during that time when there was still racism. For me, Roddenberry was an activist. He was a policeman and everything you want, but he was kind of, I don't know, put that on TV. On that during that time was kind of.
It was groundbreaking. One might say revolutionary.
Yeah, when he do a Kirk kiss Uhura, the first interracial kiss in TV, was like, no, it was great. And I think for me, he saw a lot of bad shit. He was in the military. He was a cop, but mostly he was an artist. But I think he saw so many awful stuff that he wanted to, I don't know, change it to art.
Well, I mean, that's really what art is. Are you familiar with Alan Moore, the comic artist?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so Alan Moore.
I love Watchmen.
Watchmen, V for Vendetta.
Yeah.
So Alan Moore, he actually, there's a video on this you can look up, actually. It's like Alan Moore on Magic, where he talks about that art and symbols is literally magic, and that grimoire, like the term for a spellbook, is just grammar, and to cast a spell is to literally spell. Because essentially what art does, like we talked about, music being a universal language, if you take music, and even if the person doesn't understand the words that the singer is saying, when they hear specific beats, it doesn't matter what culture they're from.
They feel that connection.
Yeah, they feel that instant connection through. And so what you can do is, with using art, you can affect a change in someone else's consciousness. And usually art tends to be better at doing this than political diatribes, in my opinion, because art isn't propaganda. Art is, and people will sense when you're trying to propagandize them and call it art. Art is creating something true and expressing that truth to an audience, no matter how you may do it. I wanted to mention, by the way, my favorite episode of Star Trek is the one where Jean-Luc Picard figures out how to talk to the alien who only speaks in anecdotes. Did you ever see that one? Dalek and Jalad at Tanagra. Look this up. Yeah. Okay, this is Star Trek: The Next Generation, and Google Picard and Gilgamesh. And so what happens in this episode is they make first contact with this alien race, and they have universal translators that translate what the aliens say into English.
Okay.
But it doesn't help, because the aliens just speak in these little stories and anecdotes. So if you had been raised in their society, you could understand what they were talking about, because they're like saying, they'll say stuff like Shaka when the walls fell. And people are like, what the hell does that mean? It's gobbledygook. But if they were familiar with the story,
Yeah.
suddenly you realize they're alluding to it. It's the same way as if you said, like, I think the thing they use in the show is like Juliet on her balcony under the moon. It referring to Romeo and Juliet. Like you're saying, this is like Juliet. And so all of their language was like that. And so what Picard and this alien leader get beamed down to this planet, and at first Picard thinks he has to fight him. And if it had been the original Star Trek with Kirk, that's probably what would have happened. You know, there's all those times. Yeah. Yeah. But instead, they actually they're doing Damak and Jalad at Tanagra, which is a story of two people in their culture who come to a place, Tanagra, and fight a monster together and become friends through fighting the monster. So what Picard figures out too late to save the alien leader is that this monster, it was supposed to be a bonding experience for the two of them so that they could be friends and trust each other. So the guy actually, he winds up getting mortally wounded by the monster, and he's laying there, and and Picard has gradually figured this out. And so the guy asks Picard to share with him a story from human history. And he gives him the Epic of Gilgamesh. And the Epic of Gilgamesh is about two people that fought, then became friends, then fought a monster, and then one of them died. And it's the same story. You've just seen the Epic of Gilgamesh with the two of them. It's beautiful, and like the moment, it's heartbreaking. I'm getting like a little teary-eyed. That is, in my opinion, the absolute best episode of Star Trek. It's the smartest written one, and like it's really pulls at your emotions, and it deals with classical art.
No, but it's great. The Next Generation, I don't know if you remember, but they were accepting scripts from young writers, and during that time. So that's because they really, sometimes you see some stories that are so amazing. It's like, I don't know, one of the first time that a series have an open door to young
art is so weird like that. Like Snow White Zombie Apocalypse, the comic. Oh no!
Yeah, because we were talking about science fiction, and I don't know, the theory, but I will put it on the comments. It's a French TV show, but you can find it translated, I think. It's called Trepalium. Trepalium, in Latin, means work. And it's a dystopian future, of course, when 90% of you is in a city. So 90% in that city, let's say Paris, is unemployed, no work. So they are kind of outcast and they shit, and they build a wall to separate them from the people who have jobs, the 10%, and they were working just for one company, and they were responsible for cleaning the water. So they have it's kind of a crazy series, and you need to check it out, because I think you will love it.
I just discovered
science fiction, but very very clever, very
Yeah. No, I'll definitely check it out. It's in the yeah. I just realized we have live comments. I just clicked over to them to see.
Yeah.
We've got some guy James W asking, "Do you support Mao?" Mao's dead, so like, I don't know if I can support a dead guy. Like,
Yeah.
what does that mean?
Yeah, because I don't know. There's always that. I don't know what happened to you, but often when you talk about leftist ideas, they say, "Yeah, but what about Mao?
Yeah. What about?
What about Russia and all the people dead? You want people dead?"
Yeah. You know what's funny?
I don't know. There is a book. It's like the Black Book of Communism. No,
Which has been heavily debunked. Yeah, but yeah, it's all the
it's
people.
actually made for by a French guy. I didn't know about it.
Oh,
And
really?
then
So I can blame you for that.
yeah, but but I started to see. I was a French guy with a bunch of other guys, and there was a lot of people participating in the book, and there's a lot of people that say didn't want to be involved after, because in the beginning of the book he writes like an introduction comparing communism to Nazis.
I hate that.
And they say no, we don't want to be involved, but it was too late.
You know what? This is the thing. So, first off, like the authoritarian communist movements, just for people that don't know this, the authoritarian communist movements of the USSR and China, they were kind of a right-wing deviation from traditional communist and socialist movements. I personally would be more interested in the communism and socialism that came out of the Spanish anarchists and like the Paris Commune.
Yeah, because the basic definition of communism, you don't have a leader.
Yeah.
You don't have a. So
Classless.
when these people show this kind of example, is like the worst example ever.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it can be really scary. You know what I will say? There is one thing that can be a bit of a critique of socialist centralized planning with regard to communism, like the USSR's kind of, I would call it state capitalism more, because it was more the government ran everything than actually communism or really socialism where the workers run things. But so have you ever heard of a guy by the name of Lysenko?
No.
Okay, so Lysenko was, and you can look him up. He was a Soviet scientist, and people like they always talk about how like communism starves people. And the thing is that communism and social, it doesn't actually starve people. Like the Spanish anarchists, for instance, they had some of the best food production. Period. They ate better than everyone in Catalonia after they had collectivized large portions of the land. But what happened was this guy Lysenko, who rejected Darwinism and evolution as fascist, he had these Lamarckian evolutionary ideas. And some of his ideas were ideas that dovetailed very nicely with like the official Communist Party line of like Stalin. So, for instance, he said that like plants were all comrades, and if they were the same species, and it wouldn't matter how close together you plant the plants, because they'll help each other, and one will die for the other, which is bullshit. They will actually compete for resources, and they'll both. He said, like, for instance, like if you want to teach a plant to grow in the cold, put the seeds in a refrigerator. And then try to grow them. Yeah. And none of this stuff worked. So, but he got put in power because the things he was saying sounded really good to Stalin and made it look like Stalin had everything under control and really understood how the natural world works. And you see this happening in the West too, with like, Donald Trump putting a guy in charge of the economy because he just says things Donald Trump likes. It's not normal to but anyway, he predicted all of these huge advances by collectivizing the stuff and putting into place Lysenko's ideas about how to plant crops and get large crop yields. And it didn't work. But the Soviets, being the creepy authoritarian people that they were, because you look at Russia under communism, they're creepy and authoritarian. You look at Russia under capitalism, they're creepy and authoritarian. Look at Putin, you know?
But
Yeah.
I don't know if you have been in Russia, but I don't think all the people are like that. It's
Oh, no,
just
not all the people.
it's just I don't know.
I would say the
Kind
culture.
of the culture. The culture is kind of like a little bit like that.
Yeah.
So they are more, but it's kind of Germany for me. It's like, for example, in Germany, there's a red light, and you will stop even if you are walking. There's a red light. There's no cars. You can.
Yeah.
And
People just stop.
Yeah, because they follow orders better.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I don't know.
Yeah, America. That's funny because that's almost Ted Kaczynski brought that up on like why stop for a red light when there's no one around. Who was the Unabomber and was a nut, by the way. But I've read his writing, which is garbage. I should add. But like I remember that I was sitting there and I was like, but it's probably a good idea to stop for the red light, even if no one's around, because maybe there's a cop watching you. But anyway. So the thing is Stalin said this guy's going to revolutionize our thing. You'll love it. It's being Trump there, and what happened was when it didn't work, Stalin and his people lied about it and said it did work, and they sent that propaganda out, and that propaganda made its way to China, and the Chinese and Mao believed the propaganda. And they said, oh, man, we've got to institute these new great Soviet programs come up by this one scientist. And part of the reason when they did the Great Leap Forward and they killed all the birds, and threw their ecosystem out of whack and brought on like a plague of locusts, that was because they were anticipating the boom in food production that would come from these false statistics that the Soviets had given them and not told them it was all lies. So there is a failure in central planning in the fact that those in power tend to like scientific ideas that are convenient to them, as opposed to scientific ideas that actually have proof. And that's what I would say is a critique of one of the major possible pitfalls of central planning and of that particular economic and political situation. But what you will notice is none of that has anything to do with worker ownership of the means of production. None of that has anything to do with a classless, stateless society. It's all to do
with science.
Yeah, it's just assholes being assholes and lying about it. It's like when Trump was lying about the virus or lying about the economy. It's corruption.
He's just taking advantage of one idea and using it against people.
Yeah. And
it's like, for example, the Bible. I'm not a religious person, but you can use the Bible to, I don't know, incentivize people to help poor people, or I don't know. You have so beautiful examples, and bad ones too. But or you can use the Bible to become a co-leader and kill people too. You for me, ideas is kind of, I don't know. You can use an idea or an ideology and use it as you want. So for me, that's why I was saying that Russia and China is not good example, because when you can see the definition of communism is not that.
You know what? I will also, by the way, thank you for calling me out for being unintentionally racist against Russians. I'll chalk it up to the fact that my ancestors hated it when the Cossacks would ride through their village and push everyone around.
You're American, it's not your fault.
Yeah. But what I would say to James, if James is still watching, even though I do have a critique of like Mao and Stalin, and I don't subscribe to that version of communism, I will also say that I am very open to talking to authoritarian Marxists, because they oftentimes do have some good ideas. I'm very good friends with Caleb Maupin of RT, and he's a big booster, and he has all these great things to say about the Russian system, and especially the Chinese system. And you know what? There's a lot of truth to what he says. So while I wouldn't say that I support any world leader, particularly not one like Mao or Stalin, I'm not Chinese and I'm not from that background, and I didn't live during that time. If I had, who knows? You know, if I'd been Chinese and I'd been between Mao and the nationalist forces, like I have no idea who. I actually probably would have been with the communists if that had happened.
Yeah, because for me that's the thing. When you need context.
Mhm.
If you want to criticize one side or the other, you need context. You can say, look, they kill people. Yeah, but when, why, in what context? You have to develop a little bit more.
Yeah.
It is so easy to just,
Mhm.
paint a broad rush
Yeah.
against communism and socialism.
There was something I wanted to talk about, by the way, real quick, if we want to go back.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that us as artists, we kind of have to stand out from the herd, from everybody,
Mhm.
and everybody does want to be special. This is the thing. So we are incentivized, you and I are both incentivized that we kind of have to become famous to a certain degree, because that's the only time an artist can actually make a living at what they do most of the time. Like there's a few working artists that are like, essentially get like a middle class lifestyle. But usually with artists, it's feast or famine. You're either toiling in obscurity and nobody knows who you are, and you're fighting to get people to listen, or you're huge and people are throwing money and accolade at you. There's really not a lot of a difference between that. What I would also say is that in a communist society, it would be much less of we wouldn't have this driving economic need for fame, because we would have the things that we need provided, and we could get it's important to me, for instance, when I create a comic, I want people to see that comic, and I want them to read it and to be touched by it and to tell me about that, because that's why I do this, to communicate with people. I'm sure when you create music,
Of course.
it's the same thing. Yeah, you want people to experience it, and that experience can happen in a small community, and everyone can be special, like in their own way. There's the movie The Incredibles, which is kind of like almost a Randian look at stuff. Like
Really?
oh yeah. Well, because they have the line in The Incredibles where the kid says, like the kid says, like, oh well, I've got to hide myself because I'm special, and the mother says everybody's special, and the kid says that's another way of saying no one is.
In the second one.
No, that's the first one.
In the first one.
Yeah, in the first one, it says that. The second one, I think they also do. I haven't seen the second one, but in the first one they do. So it seems like the writer has denied that it's Randian, but a lot of the aesthetics and a lot of the themes kind of brush up on Ayn Rand's ideology. Yeah. By the way, I consider, if we're going to say that art,
blow my mind right now. I never saw it that way.
Oh well, that's good. Well, if we're going to say that art is magic, then Ayn Rand is like an evil sorceress.
Yeah. I really don't understand how people love. Yeah, no, how people love her so much.
From what I've read, she's not a good writer. There is something in it, though, that people find very inspiring, especially if they're outsiders. Like like the kid that's smarter than everybody else in his class and gets made fun of because of it. And like he reads Ayn Rand when he's 13 and is just like, this is my experience. I think it really connects there.
Yeah.
Also, she gives people license.
Yeah, but I saw. I start to make a little research about her history, and you understand a little bit why she started to grow like that, because he escaped from
the Soviets. And they abused her, and
so I don't know.
That's a point about karma. Karma is real. You can't just treat a whole class of people like shit, even if they are the wealthy to a certain extent, and not have that blow back on you. But my point being is that, like, it's false to say that some people have to stand so high above others in all respects to be special, because everybody can be special in their own way, and we're not just one thing. Like, I'm not just we talked at the beginning here when I was like, because I'm not just a writer. I've got my political side, I've got my wilderness side, I've got my, I do martial arts. I've knocked people out before with my fists, and what was it? Walt Whitman famously said, "I am large, I contain multitudes," and that's humanity. And so if we have a psychological need to be felt as experts and to be seen as special by everybody else around us, well, that can happen without having it as a zero-sum game where we have to crush and destroy everyone around us.
Yeah, of course. It's just this whole system we created, but maybe not you and me, but I don't know. The other day I was talking with a friend, and you saw, for example, especially in this context, the nurses, that can save your life this day. They're paying. They get paid not that much, and when you see, I don't know, Kim Kardashian or celebrities like that, so we create this whole structure, this whole system that actually push you to, I don't know, it doesn't incentivize good things,
and incentivize bad things a lot of the time.
Yeah, but I don't know. For me, it's kind of crazy, and I don't think it's kind of by design. It's like, if you saw, well, I know you are well, the history of capitalism, but when you see the beginning, was like a practical use.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, we can exchange 2 chickens against this cow, but what happened if, I don't know, what I have, it costs, I don't know, half of a chicken. You will not gonna kill the chicken to give to me. So it
have
kind of
you
made
read
sense at the time,
mm-hmm.
but then it start to grow exponentially, and now we have more value than things, than people. Is crazy.
Yeah. Well,
when you see, for example,
trade, it's not, trade isn't capitalism. Like, capitalism is a specific thing where, like, okay, so it's like capitalism is essentially speculative investment in technology to create abundance. Is essentially like what capitalism is, at least to me, like economically, that would distinguish it from simply trading a thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like, for instance, and also, have you read David Graeber's Debt: The First 5,000 Years?
No.
I would highly recommend you read it, because he talks about, like, the story you gave, and that's kind of the pop culture thing about how we had like a barter system and then we moved to money, and because that's what Adam Smith talked about. And Adam Smith was a town and city dweller. He wasn't an anthropologist. He didn't actually study anyone. He just thought about it and said, "I bet you this is how it is." Yeah. So in actuality, in human society, barter was very rare. And it was usually only done among, like, groups that were either strangers or enemies. In human communities where they knew each other, it was less barter and more of like a gift economy, where you were held as being in debt to everyone around you at all times, and everyone around you was held to being in debt to you at all times. So you treated each other like people. So you need a chicken, here, have a chicken, because I know down the line I'm going to need your help with something else, and because I gave you this chicken, you're going to help me out, and vice versa. Money entered into the equation at the rise of the state, where taxes, the creation of the state and settled agriculture created the incentive for taxes. Taxes were measured in silver, but they did not have to be paid in silver. But suddenly, so silver coins started to be being exchanged to pay your taxes. Well, what was figured out was you could use slave labor to mine silver to make coins. And then you could use those coins to pay for private security and eventually military forces to go and conquer people and capture them as slaves and bring them back and put them to work in your silver mines to make more coins, to make more silver, to buy more soldiers, to get more slaves. And oh my, I've gone cross-eyed. And that's kind of like the birth of civilization and like
Okay.
yeah.
But for you, it's not really the representation of money that start all this shit.
I mean, the representation in a certain so like there is a separation that comes when you are dealing in things that are purely symbolic, like money. Because money, again, it's not, well, it's just a symbol. We exchange the symbol and we act accordingly. So what can happen is horrible things can happen because people get abstracted, they get removed from the human element. So if I were talking to someone online and I'm just writing a post, I'm going to be meaner to them than if I was looking them right in the eye and I can see the pain that my words might cause. So I'll be nicer over video or in person. Make sense? So like when you have capitalist speculative investment, the person who is giving the money to invest does not work on site. They don't see any of the people. They don't see the process. These people are all abstract to them. All they see is I put this much money in and I get this much money out. And the only one that I know that I deal with is the owner of the business. And maybe I visit the factory once or twice. They don't see the impact on the family. They don't see the impact on the community. And this can become disastrous when it's paired with like international global capitalism. A great example being the British East India Company, which then took it even further, that took this speculative investment and moved it in while they extracted resources from India and China and Africa and Afghanistan. And they essentially robbed these countries blind, stripped them bare. They starved 10% of the Indian subcontinent to death in a single year. I mean, really, just think about that. And this is before America was even founded, or right around the time of the foundation of America. 10% of the Indian subcontinent. And the places that like had, I guess this was after the founding of America because there were railroads involved. The villages that had railroads going to them starved faster than the other villages that didn't, because all the railroads were doing was stealing everything and sending it back to England.
Yeah.
And
for me, was always amazed how a little island in the middle of nowhere could do that.
Yeah, it's, you know, I think the weird thing with the British Empire also is that they so the British actually spent almost nothing on their military and on their navy comparatively. It was like 2% GDP. The British Empire was made up of them paying natives to police other natives for them. So they would create other forces that would then go out and, you know, conquer and oppress people on behalf of England. And these people would be overseen by British officers, but oftentimes would be from the regular population. Again, created by the ability to spend all this money and to impress people with this.
And I believe system.
Yeah.
Also.
The British, there's a great a book called like geez, I can't remember the name. So look up a podcast because they talk about the name of the book in it, called Behind the Bastards, and it looks into. It's done by Robert Evans of Cracked. He actually covered the Euromaidan revolution and was embedded with the PKK YPG. He's a really cool guy. I want to talk to him one of these days. He did an episode on, like a series of episodes on the British East India Company in Behind the Bastards. And he has all of his sources spelled out. And these aren't like loony left sources. These are like straight up boring college textbooks. And contained within those boring college textbooks is a list of the horrible crimes of the British East India Company, an explanation of just how crazy this age of mercantile capitalism was.
No, but it was kind of the trend at the time, you know, in all over Europe, Spain, France, England. Everyone was doing the same. I don't know if you know but during that time of colonialism, Belgium, there is not a big country, but they have a monarchy. He was saying everyone was taking what colonized in Africa. You know, the French, the people from Netherlands, uh, he said, "Me too." You know, he was not interested at all to to be there, but he was just want a piece of the pie, and was like is crazy, you know. And yeah, that's the way that most of those countries became rich, because if you see England, just a little island, how you can get so many wealth and well, stealing from it.
Merciless exploitation of the third world.
Yeah.
I think the lesson from this, because like in a lot of ways, fascism was colonialism rebounding on the countries that did it. It's these people went abroad as soldiers, oppressed these native peoples in South America, for instance.
Yeah.
And then they brought those tactics home and used it on their own people, particularly in Spain. Spain is a great example of that, of colonialism rebounding on the nation itself. Again, because karma is real and you can't escape it.
It's a bitch.
Yeah, and it's a bitch, yeah. So we're coming up on 2 hours.
Yeah, I think that will be good.
Yeah,
but was really interesting for conversation. What were you going to say?
I was saying, would you mind sharing my YouTube link with the folks?
Of
I just
course.
sent it to you because I'm trying to build up my YouTube following at the moment. I'm up to almost 200 people. So if anybody wants to jump on, I'd really appreciate that.
Yes, you can explain a little what they will find there.
Sure. So you're going to get my YouTube channel. I talk a lot about art. I talk about politics and philosophy. I'm about to do one on Buddhism, and you will also find debates that I've done. I've done debates with. I've done debates about religion, debates about anarchism, capitalism, socialism, and a lot of the time I'll have conversations with people like Caleb Maupin and wonderful people like Ivan here.
It was great to have you, and it was a really nice talk. You know a lot of shit. They'll blow my mind many times.
It's like a steel trap, and I apologize if I've overspoke my my mother when I was a child. When my mother was pregnant with my brother, she had a nightmare that he came out talking because I never shut up.
No, it's okay. It's great, and I will be happy to get a copy of your
comic
book. Yeah, I'm a big comic book fan. Well, maybe we need to do this again, but next time we're gonna focus on geek stuff.
That sounds like fun. We'll do it 100% geek stuff, no politics. We won't talk about Occupy. All right. Okay, great.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.